As our chair, Les Klein, mentioned at the start of dinner, tonight we launched the countdown to the Urban Land Institute's Spring Meeting 2020. We're going to roll a video. How's that? It is indeed Toronto's moment, and Toronto will be hosting the world to the entire Greater Golden Horseshoe, which will put the spotlight on in just over a year's time. And to help us explore this truly regional moment, we've asked Pearson Airport's Hilary Marshall-Back to lead the conversation with a select group of regional chiefs to unpack what this means to them.
Okay, everybody. You know what we didn't have a chance to do earlier in the evening? With the exception of these fine folks that are on the stage, if you are one of our featured chief planners here this evening, would you do us the great honor of standing up for a moment so we can all acknowledge your presence? Sorry, that was for all the developers in the room who want to get their applications into you in a timely fashion. Okay, so let us get underway with our panel of chief planners. In no particular order, we have Greg Lintern, Chief Planner and Executive, City of Toronto. Give a wave, Greg, come on. Brian Bridgman, Commissioner of Planning and Economic Development from Durham Region. Andrea Burry, Director of Planning and Building Services. Am I getting it right? Yeah. Leslie Wu, Chief Planning and Development Officer of Metrolinx. Arvind Prasad, Commissioner of Development Services, Markham. Arvind, welcome. Steve Robichaud, Director of Planning and Chief Planner for the City of Hamilton. Alain Pinard, Director of Planning for the City of Kitchener. Now, I know what you're thinking, it's a large panel. We're gonna just ask them, well, they're gonna have an option. 2 questions. Are you ready? Right. Who will win the Battle of the Seven Kingdoms for the Game of Thrones? Or would you like to give us your thoughts on what defines Toronto's moment, this great moment we're experiencing? All right. Andrea, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Hilary. I think that the thing that the Toronto region really needs to be proud of is that it's not just the City of Toronto, which is wonderful in a large urban center, but we have mid-sized urban centers, we have small urban centers, and we are really being able to showcase the ability to tackle challenging urban issues, urban land issues, in a way that really reflects the unique character of those communities. And we're able to really connect, and it's not just about public transit. I know we had a big announcement last little while about public transit, but it's also about connecting communities, and it's connecting professionally as planners, but also professionally with colleagues like yourselves in the room. So I think that that's something that our visitors next year would be really interested in.
Oh, excellent. Brian, what do you think? Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones? No.
I'll take the question number 2. Well, good evening, everyone. At our table on the question, what defines the great moment our region finds itself in, We had some good discussion. The word opportunity came to mind. It just feels like we're on the cusp of something, something really transformative. Another thought came to mind, immigration policy. None of this is possible without, the strong immigration policy. So opportunities come in social, economic, environmental, and we got talking too on the environmental side, and not from an optimistic. We wanted to be optimistic, but thinking about climate change, for example. Just wanted to touch on that because I think we really need to make sure we keep focused on that. We have one of our mayors that said recently, if we don't get this right, if we don't address this more seriously in the next 12 to 15 years, nothing we do will matter. Nothing we do will matter. So it's worthwhile to keep in mind because we know that we see things getting wetter and warmer and wilder, storms being more severe and more frequent. So in terms of how we move and how we live and how we eat, it's affecting us in a lot of ways. So that was something that came to mind, and just the need to be more sustainable as a moment.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear comments about immigration, especially from what we heard from Doug and his perspective. Arvin?
Well, Hillary, I asked my table, actually I didn't ask my table, I asked the Markham table sitting back there, sorry, what makes this the moment for the Markham-centered region? And
it's all about Markham.
All about Markham.
It's really all about Barrie. It's all about Barrie.
I really expected it to be all
It only
about...
took 3 planners to go there.
The other city above
I
Toronto.
expected it to be all about Markham, or the fact they hired a new planning commissioner, I hear. But no, it's not that at all. It's actually what they're saying, and which I believe in, is that our defining moment is our past. And by that I mean, we heard earlier today that Canada has been lucky. I disagree. I don't think it's been lucky. We've been lucky as a nation. I think what's happened is we have had incredible immigrants for many, many, many years, hundreds of years, that have settled in Canada, and they have worked very hard to make it the great country that it is today. So we have a reputation of peace, order, and good government, a reputation as a leader around the world. This reflects our values. In Markham, it's about the diversity and equality and so forth, but that's all over the greater Golden Horseshoe. So I think that's really big. The emerging area, or the emerging value, is one of innovation. And when I think of innovation, I think of technology. Canada and the Greater Toronto Area has exponential technology, rapidly accelerating areas. You're hearing a lot about automated vehicles, artificial intelligence, robotics, all of those things. I think that is our future as a nation. York Region, for example, alone has over 4,000 information, communication, and technology industries. So our past is solid. It's led us to where we are today. And I think the future is very bright.
Excellent. Thanks, Arvin. Leslie,
So the dragons are, no. The dragons are going to arrive at the North Wall, and Jon Snow's going to die.
Speaking of a battle for the 7 kingdoms, what happened in the transit world today, Leslie?
So how could...
You want me to go first?
Tyrion Lannister to Leslie's left.
So
Yeah, go for it, Leslie.
I would say that Toronto and the region is in one of the most incredible sweet spots that we have ever been in. And today at our board, I talked about our transit-oriented development and the convergence that's happening in this city and this region. And so that is what I think is most unique right now for Toronto. One, we have a development industry that is at a stage of maturity, that understands and knows how to build remarkable places. Two, we have a market. This is the people want to live in more compact urban areas, not just in downtown Toronto, but in Brampton and Mississauga and across the region. Three, we are the center of the convergence and consolidation of finance through the pension funds that gives us great capacity financially. And then fourth, which is the obvious one for me from Metrolinx, is that the scale of the transit expansion is like none other before in the history of this country. And so all those things coming together with strong political will to advance the integration of land use and transportation for this room and this industry is remarkable. So that, to me, is the sweet spot we're in.
Excellent. Greg?
Greg.
Over to you.
I've never watched an episode of the Game of Thrones.
Oh, come on, Greg. What?
What?
I don't know if that-
You need to go north of the wall.
I don't know
right
if that,
now.
that puts me offside the whole room.
Who wants
or
to
what?
catch Greg up on 7 seasons?
I want to.
I didn't think that was possible.
So just a quick shout out to our City of Toronto team. I know we have planning staff and transportation and parks and all kinds of other wonderful people here. So I just wanted to acknowledge their presence. One of them's building us a permanent King Street car over there, which is wonderful. The other part of this is audience participation. I'm a planner, so we can't have a public meeting without asking everybody something. So I want to know, and this is a bit of self-awareness for a very well-heeled crowd, who lives in the yellow belt in this room? Put up your hand. Okay.
That's pretty good.
That's a good survey. We'll take that back to your communities and your neighbors. And you heard Mr. Saunders and his commentary about how we have to change in our communities to absorb rising population. So everybody who put up their hand shares in that responsibility to accommodate new people in their neighborhoods. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I just want to really just lay out a point about generational responsibility. And I think every generation leaves a challenge to the next generation. So I've got, in my family, and many of you have in your families, people ranging in age. I've got, a couple of months, in my extended family, a couple of months to 94. And probably somebody from every decade in between. And I think all of you probably have a similar, extended family age profile. So I think there's a lot of generational chat going on in your households and in your family gatherings about maybe it's a bit of blame, maybe it's a bit of shame, maybe it's a conversation around what did you leave us? What have you done? All this conversation that's happening. And I think coming to terms with our responsibilities in this generation, what's next for Toronto, I think in the region, it's an interesting question. I saw that. It's an interesting question because we've had exciting times and the city's always changing, but I'm not quite sure what's next. We used to have this old region that was quite cyclical, like our old cyclical self. And you can remember that maybe from 20 or 25 years ago. But we've been on an incredible run in the region. But we've arrived at a place where we have incredible challenges that we have to confront, especially around housing and mobility and growing disparity. There are areas in the region where plants are shutting down, and areas of the region that feel that they're under such pressure they can't afford another housing unit be built, so their council is taking a pause. And you've got everything in between. So I think grappling with how that plays out across the region, housing, mobility, that challenge is here for the generations represented in this room. And the big moment for us is what kind of challenge are we going to leave the next generation to deal with? And I think if we're really motivated to leave the next generation with this region in better off shape, we've got a lot of hard work to do to make them feel proud of all of the work that we have to do. That's my moment.
Right on. Steve?
Thank you. I think there's sort of three elements I want to talk about in terms of what is sort of the big moment for the region. Well, the big moment is we are the home of the future Stanley Cup champions, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Secondly, where I'm looking at in terms from Hamilton's perspective is there is very strong municipal leadership on those areas where we need to have that leadership. So climate change, housing affordability, the opioid crisis, dealing with the challenge between urban revitalization versus gentrification. You know, a few years we were all talking about the importance of urban revitalization, urban renewal. That conversation shifted very quickly to gentrification and the issues of affordable housing. And I think the councils want staff to deal with those challenges. They want answers to those challenges, and they want solutions to those problems. And sometimes those problems are so big, it's hard to crack in one nut, but they're prepared to accept small incremental responses to deal with those issues, whether that's just providing an affordable housing unit for a family in need today, and as well as developing a long-term affordable housing strategy that addresses those issues. You know, we see many municipalities declaring climate change as an emergency situation and really wanting to tackle climate change, and municipal councils are stepping into where there's a void in either leadership at the provincial or federal level in those areas and taking on a very strong advocacy role. And then as planners, I think we've been responding to the challenges that we're dealing with over the last 10 to 20 years. We've had a shift from dealing with issues of standard of living, everybody wanting a 50-foot suburban lot, to dealing with quality of life issues, complete communities, complete streets, mobility hubs, transit-oriented development, bike lanes, protecting open space areas, dealing with those issues. Municipalities, I think in Hamilton's case, adopting flexible, innovative, less regulatory approaches to zoning, focusing more on good design and good development, as well as then being held accountable and saying that we are going to deliver. And there's much more moving into this issue of benchmarking, KPIs, tracking, and reporting back to our councils into how we are doing it and how well we are doing it. Because at the end of the day, as staff, we get measured based on public trust and the importance of maintaining that public trust and advancing the collective vision for our respective communities.
Right, Nilan, you're gonna bring it home for us, aren't you?
I'm going to try. I will lay low on the hockey comment because my colleague here knows I'm a diehard Habs fan. But anyway, I'm going to also stick with question number 2. Why is this area's moment? And I think the key, and it's something that came up at the table that I was at, but I've heard a few other members here on the panel also express, is diversity. And I'm meaning this is a very diverse area in many different senses of the word. For starters, we have a robust and diverse economy. We don't just have a single economic base. We have many different sectors that are performing very well. With a strong economy, that creates opportunities. Opportunities to try different things, opportunities where people are more willing to take risks to try new things, and also it creates opportunities because it can create some capital that can help address some issues. We have some real issues. Some of the panelists here have actually talked about those issues. You know, resiliency issues, dealing with climate change is a real thing. Dealing with housing affordability, also a real thing. But there's just so many good things happening right now, and those things are making this an area where people want to invest and a place where people want to be. In terms of diversity, not only are we have a diverse economy, but we have diverse types of urban areas. Yes, there are a multitude of urban areas that create a lot of different types of opportunities that help you address a lot of changing needs and changing demands. Yes, we have a very large urban downtown in downtown Toronto. But it's not the only one. I used to live in this one, but I actually happen to work in a smaller downtown, but a very urban place in downtown Kitchener. If you haven't been to Kitchener recently, you may be a little surprised. Within the last year, there was the construction value of development just in our downtown area was $1 billion. We do have an increasingly high density of development. But it's not the only one. There are other very urban areas other than the one big downtown. But if there are other types of urban areas that can help address other needs in a larger metropolitan area. There are business parks, and there are a whole bunch of other different types of communities as well. And then to hit home the diversity front, of course, it's the cultural diversity brought on by immigration primarily, but from other sources. That also creates a lot of opportunities. Opportunities because it provides a richness, it's connections to other parts of the world that can introduce new things that can appeal to consumers, but can also bring along different ideas for city building and housing forms that end up just adding value to the community.
Excellent. Now, I think what we've heard here are a range of interesting topics, and these are just some of the topics that are going to be explored at the spring conference, the ULI conference that's coming. Folks from across North America are going to be joining us here in Toronto, and so we look forward to that conversation. We hope all of you will make sure you come and attend and sponsor and really show, of course, sponsor, everybody clap, Richard's clapping, and really show the true talent that we have here in our region on that stage. It's really important to our community. So let me turn things over. Nobody leave. We're going to get Mark up here to bring it home.
Thank you, Hillary. And thank you to our esteemed panel. I'm Mark Driscoll from WSP, and we're pleased to be back again as a sponsor of this Meet the Chiefs dinner as we close out a wonderful and very inspiring event. My role is new. I am the National Head of Transportation Buildings for WSP, and it's all about integration. Integration within our organization, but I think more interestingly tonight, integration within the community of designers, planners, developers, builders, public and private. We've heard our panel talk about various kind of forms of integration of all sorts of interests. And, you know, we all bring thoughts of smart cities, connected cities, future-proof cities in every way. But it was interesting in all the conversations tonight to hear about livable cities, about sustainable cities, about inspiring cities and the systems that bring those together. And sustainability is obviously a hot topic, but it's sustainability in every format. Population growth, as Doug talked about, buildings, transit, of course, very dear to my heart, social infrastructure, parks and green space, services, everything. I mean, it's a totality that, I think our panel has covered from a number of different perspectives. There are a few comments that resonated with me about our urban condition, our moment, and I hope that resonated with you. The notion of sustainable and formative population growth. We need to think about that. Urban issues that are resolved simultaneously on a number of different scales. I think that was a kind of a takeaway. And of course, in our urban condition, inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility of all kinds. These are really important topics that we need to consider in everything that we do. Urbanization of our combined culture. This is something that Canadians have shied away from, perhaps, and it's now time to embrace it in totality. And of course, coming from where I do, good design and its greater value. So a big final thank you to all who participated here and to the team at the Urban Land Institute for assembling us all and connecting us in a meaningful way tonight. So a lot to digest in every way. So it's my responsibility and my pleasure on behalf of WSP to thank you for participating tonight and to wish you all a good evening and safe travels in your preferred mode of transit. Thank you very much.